Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Episode number 114 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast with life coach Darleen Santore is brought to you in part by Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and for $38 a month, your sponsorship with Compassion, your partnership with Compassion can help release a child from poverty. The best $38 you will spend every single month is with Compassion International. We're so grateful and thankful for having them be partners with us here on the podcast and all that we're doing with Sports Spectrum. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, $38 a month. Help provide a child with education, medical care, vocational training, tutoring, food, and the chance to know Jesus Christ as their Savior. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum and sponsor a child today. Today's guest on the podcast is Darleen Santore, Coach Dar, as many people refer to her. She is a life coach, motivational coach, Board Certified Occupational Therapist, and a public speaker, helping athletes and everyone she works with reaching their full potential, helping people believe in themselves and achieving all that they can achieve. Darleen's clients include the Phoenix Suns and many other professional athletes, and we talk with her on this podcast about her time working with the NBA and her time working with the Phoenix Suns as a client. What does that look like? But Dar's story is way more than that, and it goes back to the time when she was 25 years old and she suffered a stroke. Now, the common person, the common man who doesn't know much about the medical world, isn't medically trained like myself, thinks 25 and having a stroke, that's way too young to be having strokes. Most people who have strokes, at least from my perspective, seem to be in their 50s, 60s, 70s, a little bit older. Darleen was 25 and she suffered her first stroke. And we talk a lot about overcoming that. What did that look like? What kind of fear did she have? What was her faith in Jesus at that time? And what did that look like? And how did she come to faith in Christ and overcoming this stroke that she had, but then also turning it around and using it for good? The irony is that she was treating stroke patients when she suffered her stroke. So there's a really cool story here about Dar overcoming this trial and all the trials that came in her life and turning it around and really paying it forward. She's an ambassador for the movement Pay It Forward, which takes place each April. And it's such a great mission of wanting to just give back and take one day at a time and pay it forward in life with others. And that's what she does with her job. She pays it forward and helping people kind of shift their mindset and helping them achieve their goals in life, not just in sports. So I think you guys will really enjoy this conversation. Dar is a great person, so much fun, lots of energy, and just a really great person to talk to. And we're grateful to have her here on the podcast. So let's get right to it. Without further ado, she is Coach Dar herself, Darleen Santore, right here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Darleen, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. Honestly, it's an honor today. I really appreciate it.
It is so good to talk to you. I'm excited to have people hear your story, to have our audience listen to your story. And I remember when we first spoke, the very first time a couple years ago, and just in talking to you, you exuded this joy and this passion, and it was contagious. Even just talking to you, and I became joyful, and I became passionate, and I love that about you. So let's start with that first. Where does that joy and that passion come from? I know you love sports and certainly working in the sports world. Where does that come from?
Well, I think it comes from, my family has always had this joy and this happiness, and we didn't come from much, but boy, could we laugh and find joy in the moment. And that's what I knew. I just knew to just find joy in the moment. And I think through my journey, I've always been I didn't know then what a servant leader was, but it's just been the servant leadership of helping others and that joy of being able to help others and Christ in my life. And Christ has always been a part of my life, but he really became a true walk in my life later on. And that really amped up and just turned up the joy that I had. But I've always had a joy. I just has been instilled from my family, and finding the little things in life. And so, and then obviously I've had some bumps in my road along the way, but that allowed me to appreciate life and the work that I do in helping people. So the joy came from being able to, one, being instilled in me, and two, as I started to help people as a therapist in the hospital come from coma to life after serious injury. You start to really appreciate life, and I learned that early on. And then I've carried that with me through my own challenges and helping people through challenges. I don't take things for granted. And I know people say that, but I really don't, because I've almost lost my life.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's a pretty powerful story here. But let's go back to your childhood. Sports, faith, what were your dreams? What was it like? Take us to the childhood years of Darleen Santore.
Well, it's kind of funny because I have a sister who's 4 years older. We're an Italian family from Connecticut, a little town in Connecticut. And my dad, had his girl. And then 4 years later, he was told he was going to have his boy. And he was so excited. His birthday's in January. And at Christmas night, I arrive and I'm a girl. And the joke, my dad goes, "What the hell is this?" They didn't even have a name. I was supposed to be Daniel, and I came out, and they're like, "We're sorry." And so the nurse that walked in, her name was Darlene, and that's literally how I got my name.
Oh, my goodness.
The joke has been that my dad's never let me live it down, because from the moment I can remember, I played sports with my dad. My dad loved sports. We played baseball. We played football. I went fishing. I went hunting with him. I mean, I did everything with my dad. And I was lifting weights with him down in our basement, starting in 8th grade. So you could imagine that. Oh, and my father, growing up in the East Coast, big Italian family, they'd all watch the New York Giants every single Sunday. And then they'd tape it on the VCR, and we'd rewatch it on Wednesday. So I was all watching film almost since I was a kid. So basketball, everything. So sports has been a part of my life. My childhood has been very active. It's been around, my father was a coach for our sports when I was younger. So I learned leadership early on. I learned about team. I learned about owning responsibility and accountability. If I did something wrong on the field, my dad would have me back out there, and he goes, "Dar, it's not practice that makes you good. It's perfect practice. You cannot practice something that's a bad habit, 'cause you're going to carry it with you." And I used to go, "Dad, we've been out here 2 hours." He goes, "I don't care. We're going to go until you get it right, because you're going to carry this with you for the rest of your life." And he was absolutely right.
Wow.
So childhood was that.
Well, that's good. That's hard to instill into a young lady too, who's trying to just enjoy life and have fun, and getting that, I think, example. I even, struggle a little bit of that coaching with my daughter, who's 13, almost 14 now, and just getting her to understand discipline and practice, and understanding that, the games are fun and that's what everybody wants to do, but it's the practice where the real blessing comes from. And when you really understand that, right, I think you grab it and you get hold of that. But I got to ask you, you said you were born Christmas night. So
yes,
I know a few people that were born on Christmas. Do you feel like you, especially as a kid, were you getting was your birthday second fiddle, I guess is the best way to put it, because of Christmas, or were you getting double the presents?
Yeah. No, that's the common joke. I mean, they used to try to have a birthday party the week before, but I joked and said everyone's broke and tired and aggravated by then. So it was like, here's a pair of socks, Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday. Or actually on Christmas, some of my uncles will come in and be like, "Oh yeah, today's your birthday today, isn't it?" To this day, I've been trying to get my birthday to be June or July. I was like, let's just move my birthday midway, and then and they won't. They haven't. So I just joke around and say, I'm baby Jesus' sister. I got a direct connection.
Well, you should just change it to June 25th and make it your half birthday, and then you can celebrate every summer, right? You could be out on the pool and having a good time.
I might do it this June. Yeah.
Exactly. We're talking to Darleen Santore here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Now, take us through college, high school and college, and your dreams and goals, and what you're now a life coach, but what was this future life coach's life like when you were a young adult going, into high school and into college? What were your dreams there?
Well, because my family came from really small town, no one had gone to college except one other cousin prior to me. And it was never, my mom just would always say, whatever you want to go do it. And not that we had it financially, but I was the kid who played sports, who loved everyone, but I also ran for student council. So I was president and I ran for office, but I was president of my class in high school. The reason I'm sharing this is I was always the person that wanted to be the voice and help others find their voice. I didn't know where this came from, but I just always rooted for the underdog. I always wanted people to rise up, to always feel empowered. And so I just knew it would be in something in serving others. And then my grandfather had a stroke when I was in high school. So I said to my dad, I'm going to go to college. I'll get financial aid and take out loans. But I know I want to go and I want to better our family's life. And my grandfather had a stroke. And when I saw an occupational therapist come in and work with his cognition and his vision and help him kind of regain his function, I said, I would love to learn how she did that. And I found out about it and then went to college in Syracuse. And I wanted to transfer the first year because the snowbanks were taller than I was. And I'm sure I'm only 5'2", but still 5'2" snowbanks. I was like, what is this? I told my dad I was transferring to Miami after my first semester. And he says, the heck you are. He's like, you'll never make it through with that nice weather. This is going to help you. I was like, you're crazy. I said I have to transfer. I never did. And it was the best thing. I'm glad I finished it out there. And I went off and started working. I specialized in traumatic brain injury and neuroscience, and worked at Gaylord Hospital, which is there in Connecticut. It's a world-renowned hospital. It's fantastic. And that was a pivotal moment for me because occupational therapists are the original life coaches. We have years of education. But they helped the veterans coming out of war try to return back into the occupation of their life, because you could get treated for symptoms, you could get treated individually, but how do you take the whole person and help them function into life? When a soldier comes from war, they're trained in a certain way, and then how do they function back into life? It's very hard. You can't just say, now go. So you have to coach them through it and use science and use psychology and I use, obviously, if I can, faith to help people through things too. But that set me in a whole different direction once I learned this, because if I could help people go from coma to life, I tell people now, whether I'm helping an athlete during the game or in their life or an executive, it doesn't matter who, I'm telling you we can get through this tragedy or this adversity or this mental block that you might have. Because they have all their mental faculties, and I was able to help people with limited mental faculties gain a new normal. So it's really about the mindset shift. It's about your heart and your mind. And if we could shift that, we could help you with so much. And occupational therapy is just an understated role, but yet it's so important because it's the occupation of your life. It's everything you do, from your roles in your home to the roles on the court to the roles in your community. You show up everywhere you go, and I just want to say, how are you showing up? And I help people through that.
And it's one thing, Darleen, to help others and to be at a hospital and taking care of patients, to them becoming a patient yourself. And I know when you were 25, a traumatic moment happened for you. So take us to that place in your life, what was going on, and all of a sudden life changes forever in many ways. So take us to that moment.
I was 25 years old. I was working at Gaylord, like I said, as an occupational therapist on the stroke and traumatic brain injury floor. Married at the time. The significance of this is we had just bought the book like a month ago, What to Expect When You're Expecting. We were a little late on the Italian road. They tell you to have a family right away. But we were going to start our own family. And it was a Saturday afternoon. I was working at the hospital. I was walking down the hallway. And all of a sudden, the floor flipped upside down, and the floor was the ceiling, and the ceiling was the floor. And I was like, what is going on? I literally couldn't see straight. And I was making my way down a stairwell. And so I just grabbed on to the stairwell and kind of felt my way down because I couldn't see it. Had this severe head pain. And as soon as I got to the bottom of the stairwell, though, it started to subside and I could see again. So at 25, I didn't think I was having a stroke. And sure enough, I kind of pushed it aside. I said, I must be having a sinus infection. Something's wrong. I have probably some sinus infection. My husband was working at the time, and I called my dad and said, could you pick me up? So he came and picked me up, and I just went home. And I should have never done that. I should have not ignored those symptoms, but I did. And then the symptoms ended up coming and going, and they got worse and worse. And sure enough, I started losing my balance, getting really sick. And that's when I went to the hospital. And they misdiagnosed me. So this is where it went a little haywire. But they told me I had a tumor behind my ear, which was actually blood pooling. And what ended up finding is that I had a vertebral artery dissection. And when I had gone to a chiropractor just earlier, they had manipulated my neck, and I didn't know, and they didn't know, obviously, but they ripped my vertebral artery, and I was bleeding. And so that's where the stroke came from. So I now speak on stroke awareness, but it definitely was a turn of events for me, because I tell people now, if there are any symptoms you start to feel, don't take it lightly and go get help right away. But that changed my life. I was unable to have kids after that. It affected kind of my path. It affected my marriage. And so I just, you go through adversity, you don't know why, but you can't stick in it. You have to feel it, learn from it, grow from it, and kind of go on and use your pain and turn it to purpose.
So many people struggle with fear. I wonder for you if in the aftermath, because there's so much there, we can talk about what it was like to deal with it and then the aftermath. You're 25. I mean, were you struggling with fear at all in the aftermath of what was happening? I mean, you're 25 years old. There's so much left, and yet it's coming. I don't know the age that strokes normally hit. I feel like just from a layman's perspective, that's something that happens when you're 60 or 70 or 80. So to be 25 and to experience a stroke, what type of fear, if at all, were you experiencing? Did you struggle with that?
You know what was different for me is because I didn't get paralysis, but I had vision problems and I had motor problems and balance. And because I had been working with the most severe cases, I kind of didn't feel like mine was as severe. So I lessened what I went through personally. But what happened is because I didn't deal with it right away, it ended up affecting me a couple years later, meaning mentally. When I sat and went through it all, I was like, I can't believe, because it did take some things from me at the time, but you don't focus on what you lose at the time. You kind of just go through it. But I didn't deal with the pain right away of it, and I dealt with it later. So I ended up feeling the effects of it after, and I guess I didn't fear so much at the time, but I feared later about not dealing with it early on, what I lost. And now I just use it for good. I use it for how do I take care of myself the best I could? How can I tell others how to live their best life? I could say if there's a fear, I fear that I'm not going to do all God's asked me to do before I go, and I'm always kind of striving for, I want people to live their best life, and I don't want people to live in regret. So I've just used this fear to turn into faith and say, let's do all we can with what we have right now. Because we don't know when our day is going to come, and we don't know when a stroke's going to come. If you get, we know people obviously that get that C word, cancer. You just don't know when things are going to come, and I don't want people to wait until it's too late. Or I just, you were speaking to Inky, and just here he is, going to play, and then he has a life-altering injury, and he didn't expect that. Anything could happen to us at any moment, so we have to live in the moment.
For you, you mentioned earlier in this interview that you knew who Jesus was, and you kind of had a little bit of a joy in knowing who he was when you were younger, but then there was a moment as you got older where your relationship deepened with Jesus Christ. When does that happen? Does it happen before or after the stroke? Tell us about the story and about the time when that relationship started to deepen and become real to you.
Yeah. That happened actually a few years after the stroke. And it was when after I worked at Gaylord, I went on and became president of a healthcare company. And I had faith in my life, but it wasn't until after I had gone through a divorce, after I was running a healthcare company, and I decided I was going to start my own practice. And I had left everything that I had known and was going to start new because I wanted to get to people before it was too late. And I share this because I had been going through all the motions, right? And it wasn't till I stopped that when I stopped to create something that I knew I felt God calling me to, but I didn't have this daily walk with God, but I hit a moment of depression at that. I had never felt what that felt like. And it was not a long time. I mean, I feel like it was during like a couple months that I just couldn't get myself going like I used to and how I always helped people. And I had started Bible study around then with my sister, and she came over to my place, and I remember sitting there one day and going to her name is Denise, and I call her Niece. I said, Niece, I cannot get up. I literally cannot move. And she said, Dar, she said, it is God gave you new life, not to isolate or go back to old ways. God asked you to get up and use your gifts. The world needs your gifts to empower them. And I said, I know, but I can't do it. I need him. And she left, and it was a summer day. I literally had a fleece on in the house. I can remember it. The light is coming through the window, and that's when we had blackberries, and I would get a devotional Monday through Friday, and it was a Saturday. So my blackberry was buzzing, and I thought, gosh, I thought I shut this off. And I went and looked at it, and it was a devotional. Now, why this devotional came, I know it's God, but the devotional said, I did not give you new life to isolate or go back to old ways. And I had just been praying and crying, going, God, if you are calling me to something, then you've got to give me the strength because I cannot do this alone. And I read that, and I just teared up, and I said, God, I will dedicate my life to you. Just give me the strength, give me the health, and give me everything that you need me to do this. And I got up, I went to church on that Sunday, and I've never looked back, Jason. I have served. If God calls me to go speak to somewhere, I go. If someone needed help, whatever hour of the night, and I could make it happen, I would be there. And for the past, that's been, almost 10 years now. And it's changed my life. And that daily walk with Christ, something happened that day. I cannot explain it, but I felt it. It happened, and he has given me the utmost strength. And, it's not that it's been without adversity. I've had 2 mini strokes since then. There's ups and downs in life, but I've been able to go and speak to over and touch over 100,000 people, coach in different places, that I never thought possible, but Christ is bringing me there. And it's through that walk with Christ. And I just can't imagine life without him. But I also know that what life is like without him, and I know what life is like with him, and I'll choose life with him every day. And I hope that I could bring people to see that too.
We'll get back to our conversation with Coach Darleen Santore, right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. But I want to take a second to tell you about Compassion International. You've heard us talk about them here on the podcast now for the past few months. We're so thankful to have them as a sponsor, to have them as partners with us here on the podcast. And listen, Compassion has been around for a long time, and they've affected and helped a lot of people. We're talking about 1.8 million children in 25 countries are being impacted by the work with Compassion. And listen to this number, 150,000 people chose to follow Jesus Christ just in the last year alone because of Compassion. I said people, actually it's 150,000 children have chosen to follow Christ because of Compassion International. And that's the difference you can make. $38 a month. It's the best money you will spend every single month. It goes directly to impacting a child, to getting them the care that they need, the necessities that they need, the training that they need, and releasing them from poverty. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum, compassion.com/sports spectrum, $38 a month. I promise you, you will not regret it. Sponsor a child in Jesus' name. Let's get back to our conversation with Darleen Santore right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Darleen Santore joins us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Coach Dar, as she's known. And you say that you have to have a life mission. I know that I love how you influence people and you encourage people, and you have, like I said earlier, this passion and this joy in helping others. And in your talks and in the people that you help, and even in us talking, you've talked about having a life mission. Tell us why you believe it's so important for all of us to have a life mission.
Well, I was taught by a great mentor of mine, Lori Beth Jones, about this. And it was where so often we get tied up, whether you're the star quarterback, running back, point guard, whatever it may be, you get sometimes tied up in a role or as a parent or as a CEO. Well, when that changes, if you don't have a mission that you're following and you're tied up into the role, which creates your identity, you very well could fall. And the life mission helps you persevere through adversity because you're not tied to the mission anymore. Your mission becomes your sword and your harness, because when you know what God has called you to, you could cut away the stuff that doesn't belong on this road with you, and you could also harness and pull together and close to you what does. So as your roles change, you don't fall apart. So my mission is to motivate, inspire, and awaken greatness in myself and others globally, because I feel that, God's called me to reach people all over the country, which he has, all over the world. But that does not, when I say that, I know that with all my heart, and whether I'm, people know me as Coach Dar, or whether they know me as Dar, to my sister, I'm her little sister, or, in the community, or the ambassador for Pay It Forward, it doesn't matter. Roles could come and go, but every day I still wake up and try to awaken greatness in myself and others to help them believe in their calling. So I'm not tied up in the title. I'm not tied up in, what the world maybe views me as, because every day I'm going to show up as me. And when you can get people to write their own mission, which would be to write, what are the last things you want to stand for? When your eulogy is being said, what is it that they know you for? And it is so powerful. I do this with people all over the country. And I'll say to them, it takes practice. And when we get the formula down and they could stand up and they could really announce their mission, it's life-giving. It's empowering, because now they can identify with something that isn't just a role, and if someone tweets at you and says something, you're not going to break down, that you're going to have more God confidence in you, because God instilled this calling on you, and you know how to live that out with a lot or with little. You know how to wake up and live it out. And at the end of the day, I hope everyone that I touch knows, Coach Dar helped me awaken to my greatness. She really helped me believe in myself and reach my true calling. To me, when I go and I've accomplished that every day, I hope that I accomplish that. I can live knowing that I did what God called me to.
And now that little girl that grew up watching the Giants on Sunday and watching sports and playing sports is helping athletes. It's been pretty cool. Not just athletes, but people in the sports world. Tell us about how that comes about in that first time you're working with an athlete and you realize, man, this is where God has me. This is where, I say this a lot, this is where we're supposed to bloom, where we're planted. And so that comes about, and all of a sudden you're working with athletes. Tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was in Nashville, I had moved from Connecticut to Nashville, and then Nashville, I'm now in Arizona, but I had started coaching artists, and then it led me to coaching athletes. But it was really, the way it happened was, someone would say, oh, you need help, or maybe you're having a mental block on this, or something's challenging you in life, or you're trying to get to another level. You need Dar. You've got to talk to Dar. And honestly, that's how it was, word of mouth, and it just started. And then it grew from there. And as I started to work with more and more athletes, it really, for me, became a mission, because so many people would look at certain athletes as commodities and chess pieces and how to move them. And I understand that it is a business. I get that. But what happens is, all of a sudden you become pro. The title pro is put on you. You have no idea what that means. And the football game is going. The organization brings you in, or whether it's basketball or hockey or baseball. And I'll often say, when I start to work with someone, do you know what it's like to be a CEO and run a multi-million-dollar company and organize your team and put all the people in the right places, from the CFO to the, COO and vice presidents? And they look at me at 18, 19, 21 years old and go, no. I said, yeah. And now you've just been put in that position because you are the CEO of your life, and you are running a multi-million-dollar brand, and that's your brand, along with another organizations that you're representing. And they look at you going, and you've never been taught leadership, by the way. So I'll say to them, now do you want to learn? And they're like, yes, because they realize how much is at stake, not just at the game, but their life. And so for me, when I started working with them, it felt very comfortable, because the people that I would work with in the hospital, Jason, they came from sports world. They came from running huge companies in New York City. But when you get in the hospital, everything is equal playing field. Your titles went out the door, and you just were fighting for life. So whether you're on the field or on the court or on the baseball field, I'm helping you kind of fight for your best life, not just for the championship, not just for the cup, but fighting for the best life. And so it was very natural. And we always say God has a sense of humor. When I was just, especially when I help out in basketball where they're all 7 foot and I'm 5'2", the average height is 6'6". And I sit here and here comes this little Italian woman at 5'2". I think, God, you've got a sense of humor, because no one would ever have put this together but God. No one.
And some of the work you're doing is with NBA teams. You said you were in Arizona, and the Phoenix Suns are a client of yours. I know you work with them. How has that experience been working with an NBA team like the Suns and their players?
I love them. I love the organization. They had a tough season this year, but it puts them in perfect position for the first round pick, which is good. But I have to tell you, they are one of the youngest teams in the NBA. 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They have a few veterans, which are amazing. But boy, they stayed so committed as a group all the way to the end, even with a tough record. And that says a lot to who they are. And they are strong individuals that really love each other. They are true servant leaders. And they love serving each other, and they love being around each other, and it's been a joy. We even got to share a lot of faith together as a team. And I can't say enough about them as individuals and who they are as players and as people in their communities. They really love that community too.
How have you been able to, you talked about mentioning faith with some of the players. How have you been able to bring your faith into the workplace, I guess is the best way to say it, because it's such a taboo thing. It's a topic I talk a lot about when I go and speak. It's about faith in the workplace, especially at a workplace that is a secular place. It's a big business like ESPN or the Phoenix Suns. So how do you kind of walk that fine line of not obviously being a preacher or a proselytizer, but at the same time being able to work faith into the work that you do?
Great question. So when I was brought in to help them this past year, it was, and I've been helping them for the past 3 years individually. This was the first year that they asked me to help the whole team all season. And so it was help them with leadership. It was help them with mental conditioning, help them with, either growing confidence, growing as a leader, keeping their mindset right, and helping them in life. So I had said that to the owner early on, that when I help them, I have to get to know them individually, and I have to know what is going to pull each person, so that I could help them. Well, I'm not going to go in talking about faith right away, but as soon as I get to know an individual, if I know faith is important to them, then that becomes a common ground. Even if it's a small window that opens up, I know that that's something we could share. And when you could sit and talk to a few individuals about God and where God's called you, and God's placed this calling on you, and it's such a blessing, and your thank you back is how you show up, you get to talk about how you show up on the court. So when you're having trouble and you want to scream at the referee, you check yourself a little bit. When you're in the community and that fan comes by, I talked to them at training camp when I spoke to them about purpose, and I said, I want you to win, but I also want you to win at life, and this is about leading with purpose. And remember, one kid that you go talk to could be another kid that comes up in the NBA later on, and it could have been because of your inspiration. A family doesn't have a lot of money, and they come to a game, and it might be the only game or happiness that they have in that one moment because of you. You changed their day. You could change the way they see the world that day, and try to instill in them the bigger picture, especially when we were losing. And towards the end of it, and I said, I know you're mentally tired and physically tired, so I'm asking you to dig deep for your why. Why are you playing? Who are you playing for? We were able to sometimes sit right in the weight room and right in the treatment rooms and talk about God. And there are many, many players that are strong Christians there. And what was so nice is as more of us got talking about God, we'd have a whole conversation right there in the treatment room about Christ. And one of the best days that happened was Easter Sunday. We were playing Golden State away, and some of us wanted to be able to go to church in the morning. We were able to move the morning meeting. And there we are on Easter Sunday. I think there was like 9 of us at Hillsong in San Francisco, which they couldn't have been nicer, you know, sharing Christ and worshiping together. And I could say for me that was such a special moment, because honestly, I'm just a vessel. I could tell them, I could help them, I could, you know, instill things in them and try to encourage them. But when they get Christ within them and you could help them through that, there is nothing better, because he's the ultimate game changer. He is the ultimate of everything. And if you could get him to be their coach, then they're going to be set off on a good pace and a good path in life.
Dar, why is mental challenges pursued, or I guess viewed by many males as a weakness and not a strength? I know we talked a little bit about this off the air. Why can't men be more willing to embrace and view these sort of mental challenges that come as something that can be a strength and not a weakness? Like, it's okay that we don't have it all figured out.
You know, I think honestly, it's a taught and learned behavior. And that Kevin Love said this really well when he talked this year publicly about his panic attacks. But he said, for 29 years, I was told to stuff my emotions, to not talk about it, to, just get over it. Keep pushing through it. And to the point where when he had a loss in his family, he didn't deal with it. He didn't talk about it. And then during one of his games, he starts having panic attacks and finds himself on the floor in the locker room thinking he's having a heart attack and doesn't know what's going on, and then realizes later that it's panic attacks. And Channing Frye talks about it, and DeMar DeRozan, and we've had so many athletes, which I'm so happy have come out after, and they all have said that they were taught as men to stuff their emotions. And what I want to just say to people is, speaking about your emotions is not weakness, it's actually courageous. And you can talk about how you're feeling and not look weak. It's how you handle it. So you could say, I'm feeling this, I want to work through this, I need to find the best tools to handle this so that I can get on the other side of it and get better. No different than if you have a physical injury, you go to a doctor, you go get treatment from your athletic trainer, you work on it, you rehab it, and you get better, and you're on the other side of it. We have to start making the mental shift as a culture, no matter man or woman, that when there's something going on, mentally or physically, you talk about it, you work on it, and you get on the other side of it. Everything if we communicate, we could work through it. It's when you don't communicate. I mean, anytime you keep stuffing things under the rug, you know it surfaces somewhere else. And it's going to come out in your game. It's going to come out in your relationships. Your performance actually is going to suffer more by not handling it. I have seen so many guys that aren't willing to work on it and talk about it, and I could see it in their performance. And they're not as consistent. But the moment they deal with it, they're over it. And same in a relationship. Just talk about it, and then you get on the other side of it. So, and I want to add one other thing. Mental conditioning isn't just when something's going wrong. It's also I help people mentally prepare and stay strong so when you get hit, you're prepared. Or mental conditioning is just like you see with meditation, or mental skills trainings that you could do for how to keep your mind strong, intact, increase your focus, which we really need a lot of people to work on increasing their mental focus, because we're in a digital world where everything goes so fast. So we've lost mental endurance, and I'm trying to help men and women to gain mental endurance. And those that start working on their mental endurance and focus are going to have a competitive advantage as we go on through the years. So that's key. And again, when you're hearing me say that, mental focus and endurance, that has nothing to do with anything bad. So you can see you could work on mental health and mental wellness without it being bad too. So we've got to get people to talk about their own challenges, seek out help, talk to someone, work through it. And then also on the flip side, I want people to work on mental wellness, mental agility now, just to be stronger, because you'll have a competitive advantage in your game and you'll play better.
One of the sort of, not really a stigma, but something that's viewed in the church world is that pastors who are ministering and sharing the gospel to others have it all figured out. And I always say, no, the leadership and the pastors need the help just as much as, the person that they're helping. So for you, because that's what you do, you're helping others and you're pouring into others. But what about for you, Coach Dar? What type of daily disciplines or work on your own life are you doing? Because obviously none of us have it all figured out. So what does that look like for you?
Well, as we know, iron sharpens iron. So anything that I say, I will work on and do, because as leaders, we want to lead by example. So I definitely go, one, I keep my own I call it my board of directors around my life, personal. So these are mentors that are all different ages and all different levels a small group that I go to continue to learn from, to seek advice from, to help me and guide me through some times of adversity. So I have that around me, which has done me so well. And I had a mentor teach me that, because they said not only in business, but in life, you need a group around you that's going to guide you. That's going to help level you up too and see you through things. Then every morning I get up, I start with my meditation in the morning. I have apps on my phone. So if I have 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. If I have 30 minutes, it's 30 minutes. I do my exercise because I know for me staying physically well is going to help me mentally and physically healthy. And then I also I listen in the morning either to a podcast, to a video, or I love music. So I always say to people, what are you doing to set your intention? And we get so excited for football games. The music comes on, people run out of the tunnel, any sport. And that's how they start their games. So I try to encourage people, your morning should be like you're coming out of the tunnel. So getting mentally psyched for the day and preparing. So for me, it's music, it's podcasts, it's getting psyched up for my day so I could get motivated, because I can't give what I don't have. So I've got to fill myself first so that I could fill others. And that's how I get ready for, honestly, the best game we could ever play, which is life. And this routine has really helped me so that I can endure the things that comes at me, and help people also endure some really challenging things. And I could help them through that because I filled myself and got ready for it. But if I didn't have the people around me, I couldn't do what I do, honestly, because you can't do these things alone, and life gets hard. So you need a great group of people around you that are going to lift you up, especially when you're trying to lift everyone else up.
It's really good. As we close here with Darleen Santore joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast, and we ask this to all of our guests. I know you've listened to a few of our podcasts, so you might know what's coming, but what are you learning from the Lord right now, Dar? Because obviously you've experienced a lot of different things that have happened to you, many good, many wonderful things, and then some tough things, some trials, and even recently with some more health scares and some health issues. So where are you with the Lord right now? What are you learning from God during this season of life?
That's a great question. And just 2 weeks ago, I had gone through a setback of, no, not even 2 weeks ago, maybe it's a week and a half ago, of another mini stroke. And it puts me in a place, one, that I have to balance my schedule a little bit more. I love so much of what I do that I could sometimes overextend myself. And I feel like that gets me running ahead of God. And I feel that he's having me kind of take it back a notch, slow it down. One, so I could not run ahead of him. Two, so that I could be more present. And three, it also humbles me to ask for help. I think when you're in a role where you're helping people, I don't always want to burden people and ask for help, which shouldn't be, but it's just something, being honest, that I work through. And so I think God is really humbling me to say, Dar, it's okay to ask others for help. Like when you need help, you need to ask too. And so I love to be able to help others, but it's uncomfortable sometimes to receive help. And he's really humbling me, because as I go through these challenges, I've had to ask people for help, especially after dealing with a small stroke again. So it's really allowed me to get humble, seek help, be more in the moment, and to just kind of balance my schedule a little bit and not run ahead of him and let him lead the way.
She is Coach Dar, Darleen Santore, life coach, motivational coach, board certified occupational therapist, public speaker, and friend to many, including myself. And we appreciate you, Coach Dar, for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast, and wish you nothing but the best and look forward to seeing you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Jason, for having me on.
And we do thank Darleen Santore, Coach Dar herself, life coach, motivational coach, board occupational therapist, board certified occupational therapist, and of course, public speaker for many athletes, including the Phoenix Suns. We thank Coach Dar for joining us here on the podcast. What a positive person to just listen to. Isn't it nice sometimes to just hear someone who has joy and energy and enthusiasm, and they're just sharing that, and you can sense that when you listen to Darleen in her interview. And we're just grateful for her, grateful that she was able to take her pain and turn it into purpose, and take her test and turn it into her testimony, and sharing her life with others so that others can have a new life themselves. And of course, love her faith in Christ, and love that she is open about that and really impacting others. If you'd like to get in touch with Darleen, she's on Twitter. She's at Coach Dar. And if you just go to her website, it's coachdar.com, coachdar.com, D-A-R, and you can connect with Darleen there. She is all over social media, like I said, at the Coach Dar, at the Coach Dar. Thanks, Darleen, for being here on the podcast. And thank you for listening to this podcast. And thank you to Compassion for sponsoring this podcast. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum for $38 a month. You can change a child's life for $38 at compassion.com/sportspectrum. We thank Compassion International for being partners with us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Sponsor a child today. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. Thanks so much for joining us here on the podcast. As always, you can reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum. You can email me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. And of course, follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, all the social media places. Sports Spectrum is there. And we have great content for you. I mean, it's not just about the podcast. We have a website that has content going up every single day over at sportspectrum.com. And we also have a magazine that you can partner with us and subscribe and become a member with us and receive this magazine. It's quarterly, so it comes out 4 times a year. It's $36 a month, and you become a member of the Sports Spectrum family, and you receive the magazine, which has been wonderful to see. We've kind of revamped it over the last year, and it's a really cool magazine. And you also kind of supply funds that can help keep this podcast for free and available and out there. You can help keep our website going as well. So that's really cool too. Go to sportspectrum.com and be a part of all we're doing with this sports and faith ministry and making the name of Jesus known, bringing the name of Jesus back into the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast.